Okay, hello, John Dove here from the Advocacy Club. We've just had our June session of the Debating Advocacy Club. So our members have been taking part in one-on-one debates tonight. And I'm just going to share some feedback in relation to debating. So in terms of the structure of a debate, like any other form of advocacy or public speaking, you generally want a bit of an introduction at the start. So in terms of my advice for an introduction for debating, I'd start by sort of introducing yourself, setting out what the motion is and which side you're acting for. So whether you're proposing or opposing the motion, and then round out your introduction with just an outline in very broad stroke terms, what your points will be. So maybe a quick sentence or two just to say what the points will be. So you probably find with a debate like what we were doing tonight, where you had 5 minutes, you probably spend all of about 30 seconds or total, maybe slightly longer, on your introduction, because from there you want to go into the main body of your presentation. Now, with a debate that like what you were doing tonight, where you had sort of 5 minutes, you haven't got a lot of time to be developing the argument. So I would say 2 or 3 points at most is what you should be dealing with, because anything beyond that, you can't really deal with those points in any substantial way. So 2 or 3 points allows you to spend a minute and a half, maybe up to 2.5 minutes per point. In terms of the way in which you structure them as well, deal with your strongest point first and then move downwards, because you don't want to deal with a fairly weak point first or your weaker point and then going on to the stronger point. Really look to garner the attention of your judges, your audience, etc. at the start by dealing with your strongest points first. In terms of the way in which you present as well, because remember that you need to be persuasive, you need to be authoritative. You want to present in a slow manner, something I talk about all the time, but is really important when it comes to actually being persuasive. So speaking slowly allows you to be persuasive. It makes you seem less flustered. It makes you seem confident. And a confident speaker is more likely to have sway with the sort of judges or whomever it is that you're presenting to. And as well, try and keep your voice sort of interesting. So you don't want to present in a flat, monotone manner. So you can use intonation, you can vary the voice when you're presenting sort of your strongest point. If you've presented, let's say the main point, the most salient point, have a quick pause afterwards and maybe really punch what you're saying. The voice can go up, you can speak a little deeper for that point. And that pause just allows the judges, the audience, to really ruminate on what you've just said and take in that point, and it just adds a little bit of substance there. When it comes to persuasion as well, you don't want to be note tied. It's very easy to write a script and then want to be absolutely tied to the script. I think that this is not the best way forward for a number of reasons. The first is that you're not going to have eye contact with your audience, and that's a big problem, because eye contact helps with that connection, it helps with the rapport, and it helps you to be persuasive. It also, to a point, makes you seem slightly less confident, because you can tell when somebody's quite note tied, so that you can see that there's a lack of confidence there. Whereas, I suppose the way to avoid being note tied is to practice a number of times beforehand. And what you'll find is that as you're practicing and as you practice where you get to the point that you're not sort of note tied, each time you practice, the argument will come out slightly differently. In terms of you'll be presenting the same argument, obviously, but the actual words, the actual sentence structure may change slightly. And it makes you become that little bit more dynamic when you actually come to present for real, and you become more sort of familiar with the material. And where that actually feeds in, in terms of the importance of knowing your material quite well, is that let's say you're stopped in your tracks, you receive a question by way of a point of information, and it's taking you onto a different point. Because you know your material that well, you know the argument that well, you can deal with it with aplomb, basically. So it allows you to be dynamic and allows you to present those points with confidence. In terms of points of information, it's sort of the same advice that I would give for judicial intervention. Think about it in advance. I mean, obviously, you could never foresee every single question that you would be likely to receive, but think about what your opponent is likely to argue. think about where some of the weaknesses lie in your argument, and that's where the obvious questions are going to come. I mean, the thing with debating is, you know, particularly with a subject like this, it's so broad. There's so many different ways that you can tackle this subject that you couldn't anticipate absolutely every question that's going to come. But try and think about it in advance. And I think that if you were, you know, really caught out by a question, it was something that you'd absolutely not thought of, and you're on the spot there, maybe in your answer, try and bring it back onto one of your stronger points, or try and feed it back in that way if you're absolutely lost for words and really can't answer the question. Obviously, you need to deal with your opponent's argument, but don't spend your entire time that you have simply knocking down your opponent's argument. My opponent's argument is weak because they say this is wrong. They say this is not correct. That's just a sign of somebody who's got a weak argument and they're just looking to try and knock down their opponent's argument. So really spend time making the argument as to why it is that yours is the stronger point, yours is the stronger side of the debate. But coming back to knocking down your opponent's arguments, of course you'll need to do that at some point, because your opponent will make some points that might sound convincing. And the way in which you do it is you say, well, my learned opponent suggests X, Y, and Z. And that might sound convincing because, however, the stronger point is, and that's how you deal with it. So I'm not saying, you know, avoid dealing with your opponent's arguments, because you need to, but just don't have your whole argument being they're wrong because they're wrong because they're wrong because. Think about your phrasing that you use as well, because I keep coming back to this word confidence. And, you know, if you show confidence, if you seem confident in your material and the way in which you're presenting, it allows you to be persuasive. And what can happen, and what I've seen in the past with people doing debating, is they use language where they're not really committing to their argument. So they might say, I've seen studies whereby it may suggest, I wonder whether the correct point is, I may think that. No, you're there to present a positive argument. You're there to present what your side of the coin is. So be confident and use that positive language. It is my case that I submit. It is the case that. So use that sort of positive language rather than wishy-washy, it may be, I think, etc. And stemming on from that point as well, you know, I imagine most of you here are either lawyers or aspiring lawyers. And think about this from a legal point of view. If you made an argument in court, you'd back it up with evidence. Do the same with a debate. So if you've got a study, if there's a statistic, if there is you know, some other information that buttresses your argument and buttresses that point, then of course you can rely upon that, and it makes your point even stronger. So any way in which you can back up your argument with evidence is always helpful and helps make your points that much stronger. And then of course you need to finish well. So you'll come on to your sort of conclusion. And just like I was talking about last month with public speaking, any way in which you can finish with sort of a simple takeaway message, you know, for the reasons I've set out, this is why the motion should carry, or how, you know, whatever it might be, but just a nice, simple, short message, nice, simple, short sentence that will stick with the audience, stick with the judges, and remind them of what your point is. So those are just some tips on debating, and I hope you found that helpful.